He walked into the lobby like any other traveler. Low profile, plain black baseball cap pulled down, a thin beard trimmed close, a hoodie zipped up over a crisp shirt, sunglasses hiding his eyes. The bellman nodded without recognizing him. The valet held the door with the practiced indifference of a dozen arrivals. He smiled politely, carrying nothing more than a small overnight bag, and stepped into the marble heart of the hotel he'd built with his own hands. It was his seventh hotel, a flagship that sat on the riverfront like a glass promise. Reporters called it a miracle of design. Investors called it a fortress of profit. Employees called it the place where uniforms turned into futures. Tourists called it a destination. But at that moment, none of that mattered. He wanted to see how his place looked without the fanfare, without the ribbon cutting, without the press releases. He wanted to know how a guest would be treated when the cameras weren't watching. "Good evening," he said at the front desk, sliding a faded credit card across the polished counter. "I've got a reservation." The front desk clerk glanced at the screen, then at him, then back at the screen. She frowned and typed faster, the light from the monitor painting her face. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, the words polite and official. "We don't have a reservation under that name." He did not give her his real name. He gave her a name that would never show up, a name he reserved for times like this. "Could you check again? Maybe it's under a company name or a last-minute booking." The young woman tightened her lips, the practiced calm of someone who handled complaints by the handful. "No, sir. I'm showing fully booked tonight. There's a conference in town. Is there a manager who can help?" he asked, and she pointed toward a man with a lanyard who stood at the corner, speaking into a headset. He walked over with the patience of someone who had never wasted time on theatrics. The manager, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, a tie knotted with suburban confidence, looked him up and down and asked for his name. He repeated the alias. The manager's smile never reached his eyes. "Sir, like she said, we're full. We can put you on a wait list, or we have a block at the sister property uptown." The manager's tone was smooth. "You're welcome to check back." He felt the heat rise at the back of his neck. He had felt it before, at banks and restaurants and private clubs, that small cooling judgment that told him he did not belong. Not tonight, he thought. Not here, not in the hotel that bore his emblem. "Is there any way I can see the room first?" he asked, because that was how most of these moments began. A little humiliation, a small power play. Maybe someone canceled. The manager's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry, sir." Policy. A bellman wheeled a trolley of luggage past, balancing leather and silk like he was carrying other people's versions of success. The bellman shot a glance at the man in the hoodie and hesitated, the way people do when they're taught to follow rules before acting on kindness. He removed his sunglasses, let his hair fall from the cap, and smiled. "I built this," he said quietly. Silence slid across the lobby like a draft. The manager's face shifted from mild irritation to frozen disbelief. The clerk's fingers hovered above the keys. Guests paused, forks halfway to mouths, eyes suddenly aware. Someone at a corner table took a photo before they even knew they'd taken one. "You," the manager began. "Mr. Lawson?" But he didn't give them the time to make excuses. He didn't wait for the flustered apologies or the stunned explanations. He watched the staff scramble to find his reservation, to reconcile the system, to unspool the story into something comprehensible. "There's no reservation?" he asked, though it was his hotel, his system, his software. "No room." One of the staff whispered that the conference had filled the hotel, that every suite had been booked for weeks. The manager's voice floated through the lobby like a paper boat. "Mr. Lawson, I'm so sorry. There must be some mistake in the system." He nodded once. "There was no mistake. I checked tonight for the same reason anyone checks, to see how we run when I'm not around." He could have ordered them into the back room, summoned legal counsel, demanded an immediate room. He could have shouted and made a scene. He could have used his name like a sledgehammer. Instead, he walked away. He walked through the hotel as an anonymous man, past the bar where bartenders mixed caramel and citrus like a spell, past the seafood station that smelled of salt and promise, past the concierge who arranged sunsets and theater tickets. He watched them with the cold, clear gaze of someone cataloging the moments that would tell him what to do next. 9 minutes. That was the timer he set in his head. 9 minutes to give them a chance to find the humanity in their procedures. 9 minutes, because sometimes you give a place the opportunity to be better on its own. In 9 minutes, he sat back at the front desk. The same hoodie, the same calm. The lobby had regained its rhythm. Conversations rose, clink of glass, the soft scuff of shoes on marble. The manager pretended a normality he could not build. The clerk's fingers moved with the efficiency of the trained. "Sir," the manager said, relieved, "we've added you to the wait list, and there's a possible cancellation at midnight. We could also stop." He cut him off gently but firmly. He turned and looked at the front desk, the security staff, the valets, the porters, the managers, and the concierge. "Everyone, gather here." They shuffled like students called in on some accusation. The manager's neck flushed a faint red. The bellman crossed his arms. The concierge straightened his jacket. The head of security cleared his throat. They formed a semicircle around him, faces unreadable. "I'm going to introduce myself," he said. "I'm Marcus Lawson. I'm the CEO and founder of Lawson Hospitality Group." A ripple moved through the staff like water through reeds. Some blinked as if waking. Some mouthed the name. Some smiled, ready to be noticed by their boss. He held their attention without demanding it. "8 minutes ago I checked in," he continued. "Under a different name. I was denied a room." There was a collective intake of breath. The manager's mouth opened and closed. He felt their discomfort like static. This wasn't about a glitch in booking software. This was about how you treated someone who didn't look like your typical guest and the decision to deny them a room. "Sir, we were following policy," the manager protested. "We had no rooms. We had guests with reservations. I'm sorry if you felt mistreated, but policy is not an excuse for disrespect." He spoke softly, but every syllable landed like a pebble. "You have a responsibility to ensure every guest is treated with dignity. When you let assumptions replace compassion, you fail your guest and you fail me." He could have fired them all on the spot, invoked the power in his name, and pushed them into the street. The impulse flickered across his face, a flash of righteous anger. But he wanted an action that would teach, not merely punish. He had built hotels not to be monuments of exclusion, but to be engines of opportunity. He would not build castles guarded by people who had forgotten what it meant to be human. "I'm going to do something different," he said. "I'm going to close this hotel for a day and reopen it under a different understanding. I'm going to retrain you, not with lectures, but with experiences. Starting tomorrow, every staff member will spend a day as a guest, a receptionist at another hotel, and as a member of the community you serve." Murmurs rose, skeptical and shocked. "We're going to do role reversals," he continued. "You'll learn how policies should be tempered with empathy. You'll hear stories of guests you've overlooked. You'll learn how a single decision changes someone's night." The manager's face softened slightly. "Isn't that a lot?" he asked. "It's everything," Marcus said. "But first, accountability." His eyes swept the group. "I will be making staffing changes, not as a punishment, but to ensure anyone who cannot or will not embrace this hotel's values will be given a path out." "Path out?" The head of security echoed, defensive. "You mean you're firing people?" "I mean this," Marcus said. "We're firing people who believe a customer's worth is measured by the color of their skin, their clothes, or their connections. We're firing people who prioritize rules over respect. We're firing people who would let prejudice stand in for judgment." The manager's mouth trembled. Around them, others shifted with an unease that smelled like survival instinct. But Marcus continued, and the calm in his voice made room for the truth to be heard. "If you're willing to learn, to change, to be better, stay. We'll help you. We'll train you. We'll give you resources. But if you're not willing, then this place won't be yours anymore. I built this to create chances, not to house the same biases that exist outside these doors." The bellman, small, quick, with a weathered face, stepped forward. "Sir," he said, voice quiet. "I didn't mean anything by it. I did what I was told." "I know," Marcus replied. "But intent isn't the only thing that matters. Impact matters too." He asked the manager to call the HR director, and within minutes the room felt like the eye of a storm. Still, charged, inevitable. They moved through names, through roles, through a process that had the finality of a guillotine and the care of a surgical procedure. People watched as colleagues were asked to step aside, some in stunned silence, others with a flash of relief they did not expect. When the last person had been addressed, Marcus turned to the remaining team. "We're going to rebuild," he said. "We're going to set standards and teach them. We're going to meet with community leaders. We're going to open our doors wider, not narrower. We will staff this hotel with people who see every guest as a human being. He spent the next hours not as a punitive taskmaster, but as a teacher. He sat with the staff who remained, listening to their fears and their mistakes. He walked with them through scenarios, gave them scripts that allowed compassion to enter policy, and taught them how to take responsibility without losing dignity. He thought about why he did it. Years ago, he'd been turned away from a formal event because he didn't belong on paper. He had promised himself then that whatever he built would not replicate that exclusion. That promise was private and small, but tonight it demanded action. News of the incident traveled fast. A guest's shaky video, the moment he removed his cap and spoke his name, made the rounds online. Opinions splintered. Some praised him for holding his team to a higher standard. Others accused him of public shaming. Marcus read the comments without flinching. He wasn't interested in being lauded or lambasted. He wanted change. The noise was a byproduct. Some of the employees who left found pathways forward. The company offered severance, job placement assistance, and access to counseling. A few left bitter, convinced they'd been humiliated. Others took the help and found jobs where training and humility mattered. The message wasn't that everyone would be punished. It was that the company would not shelter prejudice. At the first retraining session, Marcus watched as a receptionist practiced a phone call and then had to role-play as an angry guest. The hesitation in her voice flattened into confidence as she learned to listen first. A bellman shadowed a senior concierge for a day and returned with a story about meeting a widow who loved to travel but had been brushed aside before. Small lessons multiplied into cultural shifts. He learned, too, that change required systems. He ordered modifications to the booking software to flag patterns of denials, required managers to sign off on any refusal of service, and scheduled quarterly community panels where staff and locals could speak openly. These structures made mistakes harder to hide and empathy easier to practice. In the weeks that followed, they launched training, hired locally, set up transparent guest feedback, and created a small fund to remedy instances where guests were hurt by staff mistakes. The hotel began to change not because one man used his name, but because the people inside it chose to. A year later, a man rushed in, late for an interview. The clerk could have followed the old script. Instead, she called the support line they'd instituted, arranged a room for the night, and connected him with job resources. Marcus passed by, and the clerk gave a small, private nod. It was enough. He never publicized the names of those who had been removed. He wanted the story to be about accountability and growth, not spectacle. He understood leadership was less about dramatic firings and more about steady, sometimes unseen work to make people and places better. When he traveled incognito after that, he was greeted differently. Not always with bows or recognition, but with a warmth that said the hotel had learned to measure people by the content of their character, not the cut of their clothes. It was a small thing, perhaps, but in a world that often equated status with worth, it felt like the very thing he'd built his life to change.